we've all been there, and every agent listening to this has been there, to where you're trying to instill belief, instill confidence in you, because again, they're buying you, not necessarily the product. They're buying the solution, not the exact company. So going through that and saying, Mrs. Jones, we're going to get you qualified with this as this company, and you're building the value of the company, you're presenting the prices, you go through the underwriting. Boom, I'm sorry, they are not going to be able to qualify this time.
Right.
You know, I'm going to give you guys a system that you can point to every single time, that by doing that, you should never be in a position to where your client doesn't qualify if you follow this simple 5-step system.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Life Insurance Academy podcast.
We're back.
Guys, we've got the goods. It's spelled D-A space goods. That's what we got for you today. Today, Zach, we are talking about how to pick the right product.
And yes. And we had a little debate about the title of this, because when you hear the title, it doesn't sound like the most attractive video to watch, but this is the one I can promise you guys. This video, this podcast, standalone, can make you a ton of money and save you a ton of time.
Yeah,
simply by putting your client in the right product the first time and having confidence to do that, but also being able to move forward when you're in the home or when you're on the phone, to not have to reach out in so many different directions to try to find a solution.
There's this podcast really is about 3 words. We talk a lot about competence and confidence, that relationship. The more competent you are, the more confident you feel. That confidence projects to the client, and they feel safer making a choice to work with you. Okay? There's another word that this has to do with, and that's disappointment. And this, there's nothing worse than picking a product on a whim. We'll say on a whim, picking a product for a client and them not qualifying for it. You've set an expectation, it's not met. There's nothing worse when you've submitted an application and it's getting kicked because of an underwriting issue, right? You find out later. So somebody's getting disappointed, you're getting disappointed, the client's disappointed, and then you have to go back and reset expectations, which can be very, very challenging. So we want to get things right the first time, and that's our goal today in the podcast.
Yours has turned up a little bit.
Dude, I have to crank it because we're using a 4-letter word, underwriting. You got to come with the energy when it comes to underwriting. Snap into a Slim Jim voice.
Underwriting's a 4-letter word?
Well, it feels like a 4-letter word sometimes. To certain people, I think it does.
I get it, and I love it. And we've all been there, and every agent listening to this has been there, to where you're trying to instill belief, instill confidence in you, because again, they're buying you, not necessarily the product. They're buying the solution, not the exact company. So going through that and saying, Mrs. Jones, we're going to get you qualified with this as this company, and you're building the value of the company, you're presenting the prices, you go through the underwriting. Boom, I'm sorry, they are not going to be able to qualify this time.
Right.
You know, back in the day, when we were doing this, we used to have to do full phone interviews with clients.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse than you're sitting there on speakerphone, and then the insurance company notifying both of you guys that they're not going to extend any coverage at this time. And your client looks confused, upset, looks at you, and now you're going, oh boy, because it makes you look bad.
They've lost their you don't look competent.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, they're trusting you in doing this. But also that word, that third word that you mentioned, disappointment, you can see it in your clients.
Yes.
Like you can hear it in their voice, because the craziest thing, and this has always been true, is the people that don't think they're going to get qualified are generally the healthier ones.
Yes.
And the people think they can get qualified for anything and any amount are generally the ones that don't.
Correct.
But either way you look at it, you can see or sense that disappointment. And then they don't want that embarrassment again that, hey, your health is so bad, you cannot protect your loved ones. That's not what the insurance company says, but it might as well be because that's what your clients feel in that moment.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through some strategy steps for agents to feel competent and confident about choosing a carrier that they can write with. Some of you guys, you don't really have a choice. You have one product, which makes it super simple. But you still have to know which level of that product they're going to qualify for. So these still apply to you. So it's important stuff.
Can I let the people know what we want to give them?
Don't do it, Zach.
I'm going to do it.
They're not ready for this.
Adam, can I do it?
Do it.
I'm going to do it. Okay. So I'm a very systematic person. It's been revealed in other business strategy things as well that we've done. But I'm going to, give you guys a system that you can point to every single time that by doing that, you should never be in a position to where your client doesn't qualify. If you follow this simple 5-step system, okay? So I'm going to give that to you as well.
Okay. And 2.
The second thing I'm going to give you guys is an understanding of what carriers are looking for when it comes to qualifying for the product. The different ways they ask questions, what they're trying to mean in the different sections, because the more you understand what an insurance company is looking for, and how they position and ask questions and the specific timeframes, when you understand that, it will give you a sense of confidence of knowing. And at the end of the day, guys, this is generally, especially for all you new agents out there, this is generally the scariest part of becoming an agent. Oh my gosh, how am I ever going to know what carrier to go with? Which one is going to be the right product? How do I know if they're going to qualify? And people get overwhelmed, and you don't need to.
Right.
So a good understanding of the carriers, how they ask questions, timeframes, what that even means, and then a simple system that you can follow these easy steps to underwrite it correctly every single time.
I like it. So let's dive in and give them some tools, resources, I always say handholds so that you're climbing this wall. You know, you got a clear handhold you can grab onto and pull yourself up. So where are we starting?
Well, just, for some of you that don't know, Chris loves climbing and hiking. So if any of you guys
Big
are
fan.
Around the Louisville area.
If you want to give me a call, we can go out to some Red
Adam,
Rock,
I do think
the Gorge,
we do have video of that, don't we?
We do. We do somewhere. Let's
maybe
burn
a quick
Let's
snapshot for the people in the back.
Yo, I'm stuck.
There's nothing more humiliating than having half your body up over a cliff and a lot of grunting, trying to get your leg thrown over the edge. It's
over by somebody else? Yes.
You can delete that. Let's edit that out. We're not going to do that.
But where we want to start with this is where a lot of people are now, and we see this all the time, is clients or agents, we will get questions nonstop in our Slack community channel, in emails and text messages and phone calls. And most of the underwriting questions that agents reach out for can simply be answered. And what I mean by that is, you said it earlier, Chris, and when we talk about this simple step program that we're able to walk through to underwrite every single time, the first step, and it may seem obvious, but this is the one that gets skipped almost every single time. Yeah. And I would probably guess that a very low percentage of our listeners that are in the field do this step. Do you know what step 1 is, Chris? It is read the application questions.
Guys, this we're showing you right now. This, if you're listening, you can hear it. It's called paper. It's crazy. There's printed stuff on it, and there's a reason why we have this in front of us. This part of this conversation, it's you want to learn karate. We're talking about waxing the
Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah, we're Mr.
Wax on, wax
Miyagi.
off.
Yeah, we're waxing the car. We're painting the fence. We know you want to punch. We know you do. We're gonna get to that, but this is like all the karate stuff. Okay,
yes.
So we're teaching you the important basic stuff. That's why we have paper applications in front of us.
Yes,
print your applications because you can keep those by the bed.
Yep.
There's nothing more attractive to your spouse than keeping applications.
That may be debatable,
Well,
but
but you're making money. That's the issue. Keep
man.
them. So just before you go to bed, you can like review these so you know the questions. That's why we have these printed.
100%. And give you an example. Some of the questions we'll get sometimes is, hey, what carrier will take this medication, right? Well, believe it or not, carriers, they ask medical questions. So
It's such
they're not necessarily about, hey, if your client takes this, they're approved for this or that, right? They look at the symptoms. They look at the incident. They look at what actually happened and occurs, the diagnosis,
Right.
when it happened. So if you want to know a simple way to know if this carrier will approve your client is to ask them the health questions and get a firm yes or no. And if there's any gray area or conversation beyond that, then we as agents need to dig in to find out what the situation was.
Yeah.
And I can give you an example of that, Chris. We do have a couple carriers here that we're going to look at. But some of these questions, and I'll just read off this application here, is the proposed insured currently, right? So that means, is it happening right now?
Yes.
The next section, it says, has the proposed insured ever been, right? So they may not have it now, but it could have been at some point in the past, right? They have the next section is as in the past 12 months, right? The next section, in the past 2 years. So it's really important to understand the time frames. And the reason I'd say that is a lot of these questions, for example, been diagnosed as having acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, AIDS-related complex, ARC, or human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and so on. It has all these different symptoms. And a lot of times, depending on the market you're serving, clients aren't hearing every single detail. And in addition to that, they don't know what all these conditions are.
Correct.
And if your question says in the past 12 months, they may just hear something that ringed a bell. Oh, I did have this, you know. And so we might need to ask, well, when was that? Oh, that was back in 1964. I had it for 3 months, whatever, but it may not apply to that health question.
And you might be saying, well, what are these applications? What are these carriers? These don't even really matter. We're just telling you how they're structured. And if you have I'm guessing your upline managers have a carrier that they would prefer that you start with, or your go-to. Well, so that's what you hear a lot. This is our
100%.
go-to carrier, okay? And if that's the case, that is the application that you're going to start with. And you know, like, you may be saying, well, Chris, we have technology to handle these things, but technology doesn't give you confidence.
No.
It doesn't. Like, knowledge gives you confidence. This is the work before the work. So when we're talking about doing this and understanding these things, Zach is serious about letting this be your guide, this application.
Well, it's actually, you actually sign off on the application as the agent that you read the questions entirely
true.
to the producer, right? And I want to go one step further because that is a huge point you brought up there, because the biggest questions agents will say right now was, well, how do you know which one to start with, right? Do you hear impairments? Number one, identify the carrier that you want to go to. As Chris said, your go-to carrier. That can be identified in a couple different ways. You always say it has to be good for the client. It has to be good for the agent. It has to be good for the IMO or the agency, right?
Correct.
So there's a three-legged stool rule, and you and your group can identify what that is. A good rule of thumb is if your client was perfectly healthy, and they have no issues, who would you like to put them with every single time?
And you don't have to ask the health questions at that point, am I right?
100%. So
I'm joking when I say that. You'd still ask the health questions.
yeah, you have to.
You fell for that one, Zach. Good grief.
Yeah, you got me. You got me. But one thing I do want to mention, when I'm reading health questions, I'm using my go-to carrier, but I'm not saying, hey, Mr. Chris, I'm actually going to go ahead and see if we can get you qualified with Mutual of Omaha, or I'm going to go ahead and get you qualified with American Amicable. I'm not mentioning that. All I'm going to use is I'm just going to, Mr. Chris, I'm going to ask you a few health questions and to see which product would be best for you. And I just start asking him the health questions, not telling him where they're from.
Yeah.
It's my baseline, knowing if we're able to move through this application with no problem, this is who I'm going to go with.
That makes sense.
The second step.
Let me ask you a question before we jump to step 2.
Okay.
As far as telesales, you would still move through that process, I'm guessing.
Every single time.
Yeah.
So telesales is slightly different, and here's why. Typically, in order to see the health questions in telesales, you have to get into an e-app, and it's generally after all the proposed insured information as well. Some carriers won't allow you to get to the health questions without having all those fields filled out, such as Social Security number and stuff like that. That's not the point, because I don't know where I'm going to go with at this very moment. So what I like to do is actually created a underwriting binder, which, I mean, technology is a lot easier nowadays. But it was the health questions of all my top carriers in protective sleeves in a little binder. And I would read the first one every single time off their paper apps. If you do telesales, and let's say you never write a paper app, you can still get in touch with the carrier and get some paper apps delivered to you, or you could download it from their carrier website so you have those. I'm going to read those and understand where I'm going underwriting-wise before I start moving into an e-app.
No, and there is technology that is available. Mm-hmm. This is an excellent practice starting point, so you take ownership of this process. That's what I want to keep going back to.
Yeah.
Because in case something happens tech-wise and you're like, what the heck, that wasn't supposed to be the right carrier, you at least have a working knowledge of your business. So this is very important.
And I'm going to get to that point as well. So step 1, it's simple. Read the application health questions just as they are.
Yeah.
Now, step 2 is going to be review the medications. All right. This part is absolutely crucial. And there was times when I was brand new, didn't really review all of them, or I would say, now what medications are you on? And I wasn't necessarily asking the right questions there.
Right.
Medications tell the story, right? Sometimes, and I'm
Tell
not
the
saying,
truth.
sometimes, and I'm not saying clients intentionally lie, but a lot of the clients, especially in the final expense market, are seniors. And sometimes the memory of medications they were on 10 years ago, they may not remember those.
What it was for.
And sometimes people are on the same medications for so long, and it could be dual purpose. They're not really sure what it's for now. But being able to ask them if they could go grab their medication so we could take a look at it, they're going to go grab the ones they're on every single day, right? Which is great. The second step I want to do, now, what medications were you on in the past that you are no longer taking now? And that will surprise you guys sometimes, because there will be medications that pop up for which you want to identify what those are, what they're used for, the timeframes and such.
Because of the timeframes on the question.
Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And then I would also like, now, is there any other medications that you may not consider medications that you take? It could be like an emergency pill, like a nitrostat, like some sort of inhaler or some sort of breathing treatment that you take.
Yeah.
They may not think that's a medication or a prescription. We want to be able to ask about those as well.
Or a box of Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies. That's important medication to get you through the
those
day.
and fudge rounds could almost heal any disease.
That's right.
I agree with that.
I'm sorry.
But going back to the way applications in different companies ask questions, a lot of times they will ask, have you been diagnosed as having, been treated for, or been advised to seek treatment for? Okay. So the way these carriers ask questions, it kind of covers all bases. So, well, I wasn't officially diagnosed as having, so you may answer no to that question. But when you look at the prescription medications, it says being treated for. Well, they're taking a medication that treats this impairment. So then we want to dig in to figure out what's going on there. Is there a possible...
we'll use COPD, or not COPD, like congestive heart failure, for example. That's one that happened a lot with in the field. I think the reason that happens is because people don't want to admit it's as bad as it is.
Correct.
Yeah, and they're telling you what they believe.
They could be in denial that they have congestive heart failure. Sounds pretty bad, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not the best, but it can be, it can be taken down or it can be reduced. I mean, you're able to maintain it. And in very small
Controlled,
cases, it
yes.
can be eliminated.
Yeah.
And the only case it can be eliminated is if they have congestive heart failure because they are overweight and they lose a lot of weight, and then things can kind of come back in line. But it's very important to understand diagnosed as having, been treated for, or been advised to seek treatment for. There's many situations where when I start digging and really thorough with these health questions, that I find out that a client has a condition that they're not taking treatment for. Sometimes this could be hepatitis, and they can't afford to get the medication.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're
Clear.
They're clear,
Right.
and it doesn't mean that they're not taking medications, but they've been advised to. They just can't, right? So that's also important. So reviewing the medications will tell the full story, and you cross-reference those based upon the health questions that you asked, and that will give you a good picture of your client's health profile to be able to make the best decision moving forward.
As you're going through this, Zach, I want to make sure that people understand your job isn't to see if you can get it through. I hear that a lot. That isn't your job. Your job is to get them qualified for the best plan available to them based on them telling the truth.
Yep.
That's a big difference, because there will be times in the first 2 years that, because of contestability periods, where they have the insurance companies have the right to review medical records, and it will show congestive heart failure. It was there. And then they will not pay out the policy. And then
even though they've been approved initially.
Correct. Yeah, even though they were approved, because they're trusting your underwriting in the field
100%.
Based on these questions, something squeaked through, and that's to protect them against fraud. But you could, honestly, if you're doing that and you're not taking the steps to do this correctly, you may have to use E&O insurance. You may have a lawsuit. Who knows what could happen?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that as well. Over the years, you may wonder that some carriers get tight. They kind of swing on that pendulum to not allow as much going through. And what that comes back is a lot of agents are getting clients through rather than actually being the perfect fit for that carrier.
They would say clean sheeting.
Clean
that's
sheeting.
That's the language that's used.
Or not being fully truthful, or doing things like that. But there's departments inside these insurance companies, and it happens along inside of a lot of the top insurance companies out there, that your policy can actually get rescinded at any point in time inside that 2-year period. Because that contestability that you mentioned, Chris, isn't just when your client passes away.
No.
It can happen a year into the policy, and the client is still living, everything's fine, and that team and inside that insurance company, which is trying to protect the interest of the insurance company.
They do QC checks, quality control.
Yeah, exactly. And they will actually rescind. And as an agent, if that happens to you a few different times, they track that, and they will actually pull your ability to write business with that carrier. So reviewing medications is extremely important. Now, before I go to number 3 here, I do want to say, no matter what the situation is, every single time, every call, every home, I do steps 1 and 2. Every single time. And the reason I say that is because step 3 is to confirm with another resource, right? Mm-hmm. So this could be, I'm calling you up. Chris, I'm sitting here with Miss Jones, or I just want to make sure that we're putting her in the absolute best position that we can. We went through all this application questions for this carrier. We looked at these medications, and I believe that she's going to be a perfect fit for one of our top carriers, which is blank, 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 right?
Yeah.
And then if I'm missing anything, you're able to catch that. The second one that you could do is you could post that in like a group chat or a community where you have like maybe an upline or a manager that can review those for you. One of the most common ones now is like an insurance toolkit or some digital resource to where you can plug in a medication or an impairment, and they will give you a recommendation about
which carrier is going to offer a level benefit.
could potentially offer a level of benefit in this situation. And the reason, Chris, I have this as step 3 is because these softwares don't analyze exactly the gray areas of how these carriers ask these timeframes and these questions. A lot of times they're very binary based upon the medication of what you can and can't do. For me, I highly recommend that's a third step, is to confirm it with an outside resource.
A lot of people start there.
A lot of people use that as a crutch. That's their only step. They don't read health questions. They don't look at medications.
Well, they don't have a working knowledge of their products. They don't know. It's like driving a car and believing gerbils are running under the hood.
Yeah.
Which I can't prove it doesn't happen.
And you wouldn't believe of how many questions that I see pop up that's like, hey, there's 2 of them. One is like, hey, I just wrote this carrier here, which could have been a guaranteed issue carrier. And we're like, oh, well, what's going on with them? What was their health profile like? Oh, they were on high blood pressure.
Yeah, that's the opposite scenario, right? I'm not trying to get somebody through, but you're terrified of the underwriting process and you're throwing everybody in a guaranteed issue
100%.
product. Yes.
And it goes back to not knowing what the perfect ideal client for that carrier is. Or it's, hey, can somebody, what carrier would you all write for this medication? We don't know a height. We don't know a weight. We don't know a gender. We don't know any information. Well, did they answer no to all of the health questions? That's my number one go back to, right? So step 3 is very important, and it's to confirm or to reassure your already conclusion with some sort of resource.
Yes. Very good.
Step 4 is very simple. Fill out the application.
That's it.
Right?
Boom.
And the reason why is that in underwriting, right? Because this is a part of the process, because a lot of these EAPs, sometimes it will ask you additional questions that maybe if you haven't been thorough. Especially dual meds, that you might need to add, clarify, or provide extra information on as far as time range or what they're using it for, how long they've been on it. And that additional notes and information that agents typically don't add can be a huge deciding factor with some of these insurance companies. And then step 5 to finish it all out is complete the qualification, whatever that requirement is. Back in the day, it used to be you send it in and then you wait, right? It kind of evolved to doing phone interviews where they walk through every medication with them. It's went to software that can make decisions on the spot for EAPs. Every carrier has their own process now, but to complete the qualification, and I have to add this, the qualification is not done when the application is initially submitted. There could be carrier requirements. There could be additional questions from an underwriter at the carrier.
I recommend having an instant decision application carrier. It makes it super, super easy, and one you can communicate with is pretty important.
Absolutely. And so step 5 is complete the qualification. That is absolutely vital. But these are simple steps.
Let's review. Go through those 5 and then we'll wrap. But begin this process. The one thing I will say about this as we wrap is you are running a business.
Yes.
You are not just an insurance agent. You are running a business. And if you do not have a process, you do not have a business.
100%.
It don't work that way.
There's also a term, Chris, that I want to mention. It's placement. Mm-hmm. Your placement is a part of your reputation.
Yes.
Your placement is essentially the business that you recommend and send to any particular carrier. It's at what percentage does that business that you recommend to that carrier and it gets approved.
Yes.
Right. When that percentage falls low or below a certain threshold, the carrier does not want your business because it's at a very high risk for them. But to be honest, it looks bad. It looks bad on you as an agent. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be situations where things you've missed.
It happens.
There's going to be things where medications or a health impairment pop up in the underwriting that you weren't anticipating, that they didn't tell you about, or whatever the scenario is. That's going to happen. But I would say your goal and your placement rate needs to be in somewhere in the 90s. There shouldn't really be any reason why it can't be. especially if you're following these simple underwriting steps and being thorough in placing your client in the best absolute product based upon their health.
Good. Go ahead and review real quick, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah. So again,
Can you sing it? Can you sing it?
I can't. Could you get your guitar?
Yes.
And then maybe we
I'll
can
be right back.
play a tune together. But yeah, quick review. Step one, print out, have your go-to carrier in your hand. So this is the health question. So this is before the steps start. Have a list of health questions from a comprehensive company that's pretty, that takes pretty much a lot of options, I would say. So have your go-to carrier health questions in front of you, whether it's on your desktop, whether it's printed out, or in Chris's situation on the nightstand, right?
Yes.
And then you go step one. In every situation, read the application health questions.
Read the application questions.
Step two is review the medications.
That's all I got. I'm not singing.
Come on, you got to do step two.
Go ahead. Keep going.
Review the medications. So go through them. These are past, present, and planned. Okay? Past, present, and planned. You have to review those medications.
Very good.
The third one is to confirm with an outside resource. That could be an upline. That could be a manager. That could be an underwriting guide resource book. It could be a digital underwriting software or application or service that you pay for. Step four, fill out the application thoroughly with any additional notes, any explanations of dual medications. And 5, complete the qualification all the way through to make sure you and your client are both in a good spot.
This is great. It's a pathway to profitability. It sets the proper expectation for you and your clients. Mm-hmm. The last thing you want is business getting kicked left and right, and you have a bad reputation with your carriers. Begin implementing this. We would love to hear how this is working for you. You can put that in the comments below.
I got another thing to add here, Chris.
Go ahead.
When in doubt, if you're unsure, if there's any gray area, call the company. Call the insurance company.
They don't bite.
They don't bite. They're going to help you. They're the ones going to make the decision. I would rather know ahead of time what we need to add to the application or if we need to make a pivot to save that. But they a lot of times they have the departments, they have risk assessments that you can talk to the underwriters directly and you can figure out how the ruling is. And guys, you will learn so much. And eventually you will have these like written down, put right on your nightstand.
Very good. Well, thank you, Zach. Appreciate you dropping some knowledge here. Guys, please, if you got value, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We want to bring doses of knowledge to you every week that will help you become more profitable. That's why we do this.
That's exactly why.
We want to hook you up. So we will catch you on the next Life Insurance Academy podcast. See you then.